hopefully everyone can hear me. Uh, Gina or some folks on the line there, please give me like a thumbs up or something in the chat. We have a good amount of people in this session, and this is my third Signal School part 3, the more like 301 version of Signal School. So appreciate everyone who's here. Madeline, thanks for joining. Good to see some like friendly faces in here as well. And then also this is more like a 301 version of Signal School. So I'm going to go through just like a quick precursor of what happened the last 2 Signal Schools. And then this is the last and final one of how to do signal stacking at scale. It's kind of just like, more advanced signal stuff. Like once you start acting on signals, where do you go from there? So yeah, let us know where you're watching from. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so it's a nice day, actually, not foggy here. So, okay, let's jump into things. Enough of me talking. Okay, so I want to set the stage, like just what is signal-based go-to-market or signal-based selling, and I like to think of it as this, in this terms of capturing buying signals to identify who, and that's important, who like what account, what person is in market, and then using those signals to inform your go-to-market strategy and take action with context of the signal. So it's kind of like, I like to think of it as like the holy grail of marketing or go-to-market, which is like combining your audience with what they're doing with your offer and overlapping those two things with the signals that your audience is taking that defines the audience, and then like using the context of the signals for your offer. And the more you can overlap those two things, the better your results will be. So in the first session, first Signal School 1, I talked about signal selection and prioritization. So let's just do a quick recap of that. And so I have this like handy resource here. Actually, maybe I'll just go to it. Actually, I should copy link address, and then I'll drop it in the chat. I feel like if you're on this time, you've probably already seen this before, but so be it. Let's go back in here. Whoops. Okay, so the first thing with signal selection is there's just a, oh shoot, it says my Wi-Fi is not the best, but hopefully I'm still okay. It's back on now. Okay, so with signal selection, there's just like a lot of signals out there, and the cold start problem is actually something that I hear a lot. Is like, what signals should I start with? Help me with the starting point. So I created this resource, and like a lot of this resource in the coming slides will, like if you can move from tab to tab, you'll kind of see like how to work with all these, how to figure out like which signals of this 100 to select. But the reason I created this is just so you can have a large pool to start with of signals. There's 100 here that you might want to consider, but 100 is way too many. So like we want to narrow this down. So how do we do that? So one way to start is to just group the signals by category. Like, is it a website visit signal? Is it a product data signal? Is it happening on social engagement? Is it like an account signal, like a tech stack change, or hiring surges from an account? And so grouping in this way is super helpful. And again, like there's this infographic plus like categorization in the resource provided here. The next, I'm jumping around too fast here. The next thing that I like to do, if my own screen fooled me. The next thing I like to do here is to, in the spreadsheet too, you'll be able to like look at the signals and approximate both the propensity score, like how likely is that signal to convert to a next stage, and then also like what volume of signal can you expect to get. So like a demo request is one example of like a signal that's super high propensity, but probably really low volume. You're not going to get like a ton of those, week over week. But maybe a website visit is also like pretty decent propensity, not as much as a demo request, but especially if it's like a pricing page visit, you might get a good amount of those volume wise. And so just mapping those two different vectors like really helps with prioritization. And like when you do map this, I kind of like plotted it out on this chart here, where like when you do map those into this view of, okay, what's the volume of signals you get, and what's the conversion rate, and like looking at plotting out like the different spectrum of signals on those like two different dimensions, you typically find that there are some that are like really, it's just kind of like a rule of thumb. Like uh, the really high propensity signals, like a demo request that converts at like 50%, has a really low volume rate, just 'cause, like the intent level is so high there. And then at the other end of the spectrum, like cold outbound, you have nearly unlimited amount of. It's not really a signal, but it's just you have like unlimited amount of uh, actions to take, or prospects to take action on, but like the conversion rate is very low. And so what signals help you with is to identify like, okay, what are the signals that our accounts and prospects showing, and like which ones should we take action on and prioritize. And so as I plotted these out, you kind of get this curve of, okay, um, where like uh, what signals are converting super well, and then like where do they fall in line with like the volume of signals that we can capture. And it just so happens that like they kind of follow this curve and this trajectory. And I typically like to start in this yellow cohort here, when you're getting started with like what signals to action on and what to select. And the reason for that is just because, you know, uh, you want to start at a place where you're going to get a pretty decent conversion rate, and then also kind of like, and like work your way backwards. It's like these are the highest priority leads in this top right quadrant here. And so like you don't want to leave any of these signals on the table, so to speak. And then the reason this other area here, this like automation area, is grayed out is because there's this other kind of funny dynamic of the higher the intent level, the higher the signal, the intent behind the signal, the actual lower amount of personalization or thought you might need to put into how you reach out or how you act on that signal. Demo request is like a great example there, where if someone's requesting a demo, they don't even need a follow up email really. They essentially just drop them a calendar link, put them into a chili piper flow, and they can book the next step. You don't need a human involved, but like once you start moving down the level of intent, you do need to put some thought into how to outbound, like a product sign up, for example. You can't just say like, here's my calendar, like let's book a time to talk. But you probably want to say like, thanks for signing up for our product. Um, I noticed you have like this, and this about you need to do some research about the company or the person, and then use that context to follow up. So this area here tends to take more thought when you're doing outreach. Okay, and then this is getting a little bit more detailed onto like the the actual spreadsheet here. But essentially, I created this column E where you can select the signals that are applicable, or that you think you have a hypothesis of, these are the ones that we want to test and experiment with and prioritize. And then you can filter by this applicable checkbox. And then once you do that, it'll map all of the signals that you select onto this same kind of dimension chart, where it's like, okay, this is high volume, low conversion rate, and this is low volume, high conversion rate. And if you map your signals according to these two, propensity score and volume, you'll start to see the signals that you maybe want to get started with right here. Like anything in this top right quadrant is probably like your best bet, where there's a outsized volume to conversion rate score. And so this is kind of like a nice heuristic for how to prioritize what signals to get started with. I will also add that these numbers in here are approximations. They're not like fully studied benchmarks. And so the thing that you want to do here, and if you're editing any of these, or if you want to like customize it or tailor it to your own use case, I would change the numbers here based on like what your own volume and best educated guess for like conversion rate would be. So just a note there. Okay, so that covers like the first part of was Signal School 1. And then the second part is we covered signal execution. So it's like, okay, you selected these signals. These are the signals that I want in this top right quadrant. Now, like, how do we actually, take action on them and have our go-to-market teams do that? And so to do that, there's these prerequisites that you need in order to take action. That's essentially, one, you need to be able to capture the signal. Two, you need to be able to enrich and identify the person behind the signal. That's super important because you don't want to just reach out to any person in some faraway land with that's an intern. You need some criteria of who you're going to reach out to make sure that they can actually use your product. And then the last part is the ability to take action on this, and like the on these two different things. And so the great part about this is you kind of take a crawl, walk, run approach, and the prerequisites, honestly, you pretty much just need like a spreadsheet and an internet connection to at the bare minimum in the walk phase. So that's something I like to highlight is just like you don't need to over engineer things with tooling and things like that. So I have some examples here from this one's from Jared, where I think most people probably know Jared from Rev Genius. Anyway, so the thing here is just going through the crawl phase is like signal capture. You can take this LinkedIn post from Jared and then like manually just comb through all of the people who are reacting and commenting on that post if it's a relevant post to your product or whatever. I timed myself on there. It took me 5 minutes to run through 48 comments and 71 reactions here. And so this is you're capturing manually the signals. And then, the signals you're capturing here is just like looking at the LinkedIn post. The capture part is just sifting through to see, is this signal from the right person, and are they in my ICP? And so like once you go through these 71 reactions and 48 comments, that'll get you to the people who you want to reach out to. And then to reach out, it's as simple as just spinning up an email client or connecting with them on LinkedIn and DMing them. So this is like something you could do at like a very MVP state of signal execution. It's just like comb LinkedIn, find the signal somewhere on the internet, put the leads and prospects into a spreadsheet, and then like email them. Like no CRM required or anything like that. This is very tedious to do at first, but eventually you'll get to a state where you need some sort of software, which is where full disclosure, the company that I work at, Common Room, is one of those software tools that helps you do that. So that's kind of where we get to this walk phase here. And I try and use the same signal capture or the same signal across all these different stages here. So we have for signal capture on LinkedIn, you can use tools that do the same thing I just showed manually on a LinkedIn post, except for it's a Chrome plugin. It'll just pull in or you even export a CSV of people who have engaged with any LinkedIn post. And so we can pull this into Common Room for the signal capture part, which is what I'm using for this demo purposes. And then the other piece of identify and enrich is that we can start to add, because with Common Room, you can pull in, we have this thing called Person 360 where you can understand the person and the account and like do waterfall enrichment and identity resolution across any of these people. You can start to add those filters on of the people who you identify and enrich. So these are all economic buyers who have done this signal, who've reacted to one of my posts. And we just define economic buyers by, director level and above title, and also some other like title filters of, they're in a go-to-market role or something like that. And then the last part here, I just kind of combined everything under this one slide, is take action with context. So with these people here that are found that they've reacted to one of my posts and they're in our ICP, I can then take action by sending them to an outreach sequence or even syncing them over to HubSpot for like more nurturing or something like that. And then the action piece is once you do send them to outreach, you can generate this is a little more advanced. You can generate an AI snippet, but this is just showing that you can match the signal or the action that's happening with a bespoke outreach sequence, so that you're not just sending something like generic outbound email. You're using the signal to inform your outbound. Okay, and on the run side of things is actually kind of want to pause here on the walk. So if you're building, so I think of these as like plays, and we'll get into this in the like more advanced section, but I think of these as like plays. Like if I'm an SDR team, or if I'm an IC SDR or a sales rep, I'm logging in to a platform and I'm looking at these like what I'm showing here as kind of like a burn down list of a play. And so if I'm just blindly going in because I don't need to do any personalization or anything like that, and clicking on all these people. I can just show what this looks like in common room. It's actually easier. So you can see here we have these different segments of people here. So this is a play of pricing page visits from economic buyers in the last 28 days. Here's one of job changers from former product users. And what you can do here is just click through and add people to a sequence. And if I'm a rep and this is my like replenish view burn down list, call it, and I want to click on all, and I'm just blindly clicking on all these people and adding them to a pricing page sequence, and adding, oops, clicking send. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to actually spam these people. If I'm just doing that without any kind of like thought or extra human review, then that kind of gets us to what you can build out with the run phase. And so the run phase is essentially just doing what I just did, but in an automated fashion. So this is just from signal capture to all the way down to sending out the email and doing all of that on autopilot. So the example I'm using here is, when someone, it's a website visit actually. So when anyone visits your website and they're identified and they're on the pricing page, make sure filter by their, this is the identify and rich section, filter by economic buyers in North America, and then add them to that outreach sequence that I just selected. And then you can get a sense of like, here's the detail and the dynamic like things that are populated within that like outreach sequence, so that it's just like a template that you can kind of like cut and paste. Does it have to be? I see a question here, so let me highlight this. Actually, it's a good question, and it's nice to highlight right now. How do I highlight this? Respond. Oh, I don't know how to put this on the stage, but there's a question from Michaela about, does it have to be an email outreach or can it be a LinkedIn connection request? And so yes, it totally can be. Oh, thank you for doing that, Gina, I think. So yes, it can be a LinkedIn request. The thing is with a LinkedIn request, you need to be connected to that person. So, instead of here where I was like, okay, add to outreach sequence, you can say, connect on LinkedIn or go to LinkedIn profile. And then there's other tools, and we're also building something like that would be able, so you'd be able to like DM someone on LinkedIn. But it's just a caveat that you can only do, I think, 100 connection requests a week, and then also want to make sure that you have to be connected before you DM them. So those are just some like caveats about using LinkedIn. But you could also add, like, Outreach has the ability to add a step for LinkedIn engagement, and so does SalesLoft and these other tools too, to add like a LinkedIn engagement or a cold dial or whatever within the sequence. And so like you can build those steps into Outreach as well. Okay, cool. Seems like I answered that. Okay, so, and then yeah, so the last part is just doing everything on autopilot. And then that brings us to, I've already been talking for 20 minutes on like the stuff we've already covered, but hopefully that's helpful precursor. So that gets us to like, okay, how do we're finding the right signals, and we're running, a signal-based execution, whether it's in the walk phase or the run phase. And then like the next thing is, okay, what's next? Like, how do we start to scale this and make this part of our entire go-to-market strategy and motion? And so this is kind of where you get a little bit more advanced, more of like the 301 maturity curve level of how to run signal-based plays. And so one thing to highlight, and this is kind of like a framework for the next slide too, is just like reminder of these are the prerequisites that you need. And like there's also kind of like a maturity curve to how you go about filling in the blanks, or how you go about enabling these prerequisites. And so at the very early, this is also kind of like a crawl, walk, run approach, but at the very early stage of the signal-based go-to-market maturity curve, you're actually doing comprehensive digital signal capture. Like you have a way to ingest and understand, at least like get some sort of data around the signals that you care about into, whether it's a data warehouse, whether it's in the common room, whether it's into just like a spreadsheet. You have like a way to capture all the signals, because that's kind of like baseline is like, you're blind to buying signals if you're not capturing them, obviously. The next like more advanced side of these prerequisites is not only capturing the signals, but also connecting the dots of, this person, what's called like identity resolution. It's like this person who visited our website is also following our competitor, who also like someone else on their team signed up for our product. Like that's kind of what I mean by this like unified identity and account intel. It's essentially grouping together the same person along their customer journey and all the different touch points that they have, so that you have. It's actually pretty good to show like an example of this too. So hopefully, let's see. Let me see if I can find here. I'll use Florin because he's on our team. So if I click on Florin, you can see here that it's not just like one signal that we're capturing on Florin. It's all of the different entities that we have identified him on. So in Salesforce, he has multiple emails in HubSpot. We have him on LinkedIn and all these different channels where Signal exists. We have all his product usage data here. We have his website visits, and he's an employee, so there's like a lot of website visits. We have the campaigns that he's in Salesforce, which we don't really use heavily. So this is kind of what I'm saying of like stitching together all the different signals onto like a single user record. And then the other thing too is that this user record is also grouped up into an organization. So we know that Florin is doing all these activities as a single person, but also within Common Room itself. Sorry, I'm getting too much into like actual Common Room and trying not to sell too much. But within Common Room itself, we also know not only is it Florin, but it's myself and it's Matson, it's other people on our team that are doing these things. So if I pull up, let me see if I can just pull up Common Room here so I don't blow up anyone's spot unintentionally. Okay, so here we can see this is the account overview. So everything's like grouped up into this account, and we can see the contacts within Common Room, and then also everyone's activity. So not only are you seeing like an individual's signals, you're grouping all that into an account or an organization object, which is super important for getting to this more like advanced state. And then the last thing the last thing that we see like other companies doing that's more on the advanced like side of things is okay, you're doing these two things. You're capturing signal. You're pretty confident of like the person and the account behind those signals, and then like how can we use AI and automations, and like how can we like make that whole like action layer much more easier for our go-to-market team. And so this is kind of like a maturity curve that you can kind of like gauge like where you are within your like signal based approach. Okay, and so then the next kind of question we get, or a way to prioritize is, okay, so you're running these plays. You're running not just like one website visit play, but you're also running like PLG product plays, and you're running job changer plays. And so as you're running these plays, you kind of want to know like which ones are working the best, so that you can benchmark and you can understand like, okay, if this pricing page visit play, and this is hypothetical too, so it's not like these are in any kind of like order or benchmark or anything like that. It's all kind of hypothetical here, but you can say like, okay, this pricing page visit play, what did it convert at, and how many signals am I getting? So that, because like when I get a signal from this play, my SDR team or my sales rep team can act on it, and they convert at this rate. And so once you can like benchmark the different plays, then you can kind of stack rank. You can stack rank which of these, let me go back in here, stack rank which of these different plays, if job changers, for example, was higher converting than pricing page, like as a ops person or as a like team manager, I can move this up to the top of the list here. And then our team can then like start burning through the list in a prioritized fashion. So it's like, this is highest converting at the top, this is next highest converting, and then like, and so on and so forth. And so this kind of just gives as your teams are executing the signal-based approach, they can do so in a prioritized way. Let me go to this slide here. Okay, so and then once you do this, once you kind of benchmark like what is, I guess I have it here, is you can kind of like benchmark both like what your signal frequency is, and this is in this like spreadsheet that I shared. You can say like, okay, for this play, here's the amount of signals we're getting on a weekly or monthly basis. Here's our conversion rate to meeting, and then here's how much pipeline that is getting us. And so essentially you can start like layering on all these things to like, okay, we're getting 45K in pipeline. Our total pipeline goal is 1 million, so that gets us not a lot of the way there. So like, what other signals do we need to need to add on, or plays that we need to add on for our teams to use to get to that 1 million or however much your target is mark. And so, and then also there's also the amount of hours per day that an SDR or a sales rep can work a lead from signals. So, um, essentially, like, you know, I got this number. I did some like back of napkin math and got the number of monthly hours that is possible for an SDR or a like pipeline generating person um, uh, to work leads. And essentially, it's like assuming they work 5 hours a day, like purely doing pipe generation and outbound, the amount of hours needed are like 100 or less. They can work 100 or less hours on these like signal based things. And so essentially, like if your rate, sorry, I feel like I'm being a little bit confusing here, but essentially, like what I'm getting to is the rate of conversion needs to be within a certain threshold so that your SDR team is only working the signals in this like green area because they're the highest converting plays. And so anything out of the bounds here, you almost want to like have your team ignore those signals. Like maybe a cold outbound is at the very worst performing conversion rate up here. And so if you can get your team to only work everything in this green area, you'll be able to like hit your quota based on purely based on like filling up their funnel with signal based prospects. I feel like this is maybe a little bit too what was it like a little all over the place, but essentially, hopefully, you get the point here. Maybe people can give me a thumbs up and be like, okay, I kind of understand. But maybe this is more helpful too. Is like, okay, so this gets us to a goal of like, okay, these are the plays that are performing well, and we know that a play that works is a play where our team can follow up with people within that play and get a higher than 5% conversion rate. And so we're going to say like, okay, these are those signals that we really care about and that we want our team definitely prioritizing. And then it's our job as a marketer or our job as a like SDR leader to say like, okay, how do we generate more of these signals? Because like if we do, that fuels our team with the signals that they need to hit their goal. And if we don't have enough of those, essentially our teams aren't efficient and we're not equipping them to hit their quota. And so you either need to would either need to scale back the team or increase the signals or do something different. And so this is where we kind of get into like signal optimization or signal category optimization. And so what I was showing before of like how to categorize the different signals, like, and this is just hypothetical as well. Like website activity might be a better signal to start with than product signal. So don't just follow this like start here and go up. It's all kind of tailored to like your own use case is your own use case. So start with that prioritization on the signal selection side of which was on part two, and then you'll figure out okay what category do we want to get started with. And so I'll use the product led signals as a hypothetical here, and essentially product led signal, people signing up for your product, people inviting others to the product, hitting usage ceilings, things like that. These are all signals within that category that you would optimize to get to this like these different like thresholds of signal based plays. And so when you're I would say instead of just jumping from like one category to the next, it's usually better to just try and optimize the like product led category or a website visit category to its full extent before like jumping upstream. I have a slide here like jumping upstream like this. Okay, so and then in order to fill the bucket of your team, there's a few things you can do within one signal category to get more both convert higher conversion rates or more volume out of those signals. And so yeah, signal category optimization. This is an example of product signal. So as I was saying, don't jump from here to here. Start here or start with the signal based play on the product side that works well, and then like move on to the other signals within your product that you would want to like action. Hopefully that makes sense. And then in order to improve the results from running these product based signal plays, I'm using product as a hypothetical here. There's a few things that you can typically do. One is get a faster speed to lead time. So like when the signal happens, can your team follow it faster? Another thing you can do is optimize the messaging. So when the signal happens, can you make it more relevant, hit on more pain points in your outbound messaging? And then the last one is just increase the number of touches. And this is kind of like what the marketing team's goal is essentially like, get more signal at bats or increase the number of emails that you're sending in a sequence, or touch points that you're having in a sequence. And so typically when you, after doing these things, you'll start to get higher conversion rates on each of your plays, but then it'll start to like peter out. It'll start to hit like ceilings, and then the next thing to do after hitting those ceilings within this cohort here is to then start to move up into another signal category that you think would be the best bet for, just kind of going back to that, like the diagram of like the top right quadrant. These signals are really solid. Like, let's go to this other category. And so that's where we get to like expanding your signal category. An example of that could be like dark funnel activity, like activity happening on social or LinkedIn. Like, this is a play that we run at Common Room, and I think a lot of people at Rev Genius have seen. And so this is an example of, okay, we tapped out our product signals. Now we're going to go to this other category of social signals and do the same process of like, what's the propensity score? What's the volume? Like, how do we, and then even go back to this. So like, can we have a faster speed to lead time? Can we make our messaging better? Can we increase the number of touches? And so once you start doing those two things, then you're kind of like just filling up it's just kind of like rinse and repeat from here. It's like, fill up the signal stack, or the signal like S curves, until you're able to fill your team's bucket with the right kind of signal based plays. And then here, I wanted to have like another example of some things you can do, especially as you're going from like one category to the next. So essentially, like, you would probably be learning, okay, this approach worked really well for a new account sign up. And then this approach worked really well for a dark funnel activity, like someone reacting to a competitor post or something like that. And so this is kind of where, as a next step of further optimization, you can merge those two, or signal stack those two different signals together. And so I put some examples here. So one example could be like someone who is a power product user. This is a product led signal, who recently changed jobs. Like, this is a signal category of like employment trends. And so you can combine those two and overlap those two to power users who recently changed jobs. And like, this context gets you a lot more granularity to follow up with a message that like really resonates, or that helps your team prioritize like who to go after. And so there's a few more examples we can walk through here, as like a signal of a web visit and a tech stack. So anyone who visited an organization who visited your website, and you found that organization has a complementary tool or a competitive tool, you can use those two things to craft a more personalized outbound message. Or last one here, competitive engagement. This is someone engaging with a competitor on LinkedIn or something. And then that same account is hiring for someone in your ICP. It's a way to show that this account should be more highly prioritized than any other account that your team is prospecting into. I'm actually not going to go into this piece right here, because it's essentially like you can start to get more signal on top of your signal. Let's just do it. So there's something you can do too, where it's like, okay, this signal on its own, like a hiring signal on its own, is a great signal. Like, someone's hiring for a skill set that includes, the word, AI prompter or something like that. And at the account level, that's interesting, but there could be like thousands of accounts who are hiring for someone with that keyword. So I'm going to do an example of that here. Keywords in job listing keyword search. So like, this is essentially like trying to find open roles for companies that are relevant. And so there's a company that we work with called GraphQL, and I like to use that as a keyword listing. So essentially, like, this will tell me, when I add this filter here, signals of any company who has a job opening with a keyword that includes the word GraphQL in it. And so that narrowed down our list now to 22,000 accounts. But like, how do I prioritize these accounts? Like, I don't want to just go from like top to bottom, just because like they have one job opening for a GraphQL engineer. And so what you can start to do on the account level is to stack the same signal and aggregate the same signal so that you can prioritize which accounts your reps and team should prioritize. And so to do that, you could probably use like a data analytics tool too, not just Common Room, but I'm going to show you how you can do it in Common Room. So we can say create new custom field here, and I'll say graph QL openings. And then we'll make this a calculated field and do job listings. Keyword is GraphQL. Hold on, I do this here. And then I'll save that. And what this will do is create a new field here contains the number of GraphQL openings within any of these accounts. And so I'm just going to save this. And this takes a while for us to calculate, but I'll just show you an example through another. You can see like the clock thing here. But essentially, imagine that this is the one I just created for GraphQL job openings. You can sort in descending order. And this will essentially give you like these are the accounts that have the most openings for GraphQL engineers, for example, because you're calculating the number of those mentions here. And then you can even go even more granular by clicking into it and seeing that exact, those exact openings, for example. So yeah, I'm not sure if I was going to do it live, and I did it live. And yeah, I would say the last thing I want to hit on is, this approach like works really, really well. We have a bunch of customers that are really notable, like Zapier, like Notion, Temporal, who are essentially like getting their reps, their team more meetings booked, more pipeline, and then also making it a lot easier for them to do that. So it's not only adding more to the top line, but also making everyone more efficient and happier. So encourage people to check things out, and then also plug to follow me on LinkedIn or check out Common Room. Next up is actually this is an old slide. We don't have anything else. This is the last one. So thanks everyone for bearing with me, and I think there's maybe some questions here that I'm happy to answer. Let me edit this slide. That's all. Cool. Oh, it's being moved to Q&A. Thanks, Gina. Okay, when you talk about conversion rate, do you mean conversion to an opportunity or into a customer? So this is a really good question. It can be, I would say it can be many things. Essentially what you're looking for is the early indicator of predictability. So what I mean by that is, if the conversion rate is like a reply, like is your reply down the funnel, like once a reply happens, is it consistent conversion rate down the rest of the funnel? And so it could be meeting booked, like a meeting book happens and like those convert to pipeline at 50%. And so it's really just trying to get signals, pun intended, on which milestones people hit in their customer journey that are predictable throughout the rest of the funnel. So for us at Common Room, we use pipeline as a conversion rate. Is like this signal happened, did it convert to pipeline or not? And pipeline we define as a stage 2 opportunity. And stage 1 would be meeting booked. So at the early indicator level, we could even look at replies, or we could look at meetings booked. But the most durable conversion rate and very predictable conversion rate is if it's pipeline, then it like converts to close 1 at a very predictable rate. So hopefully that answers that question. Another question from Michaela. What if we don't have a data warehouse for signal capturing? Can Common Room do that? Yes. You don't need to have Segment or Snowflake or anything like that. Like Common Room can work as, it's not really a data store, but you don't need a data warehouse to capture all of these signals. You do, on the other hand, though, if you're doing product data, you need some way to get your product data into Common Room. And so you might need a data warehouse to capture your product data signal and then use like a reverse ETL tool to get that product data into Common Room. And so there is some like nuance there, but a LinkedIn signal, a website visit signal, most of the different signal categories you can just store in Common Room without having to need a CRM or CDP or data warehouse. Hopefully that answers that question. Question from Thomas: Are recordings from part 1 and part 2 available? Yes, I don't have them on hand, but we can share those. Those are a little bit, yeah, easier to, or it was less advanced. So, um, that's definitely a good precursor to what we just talked about here. Question from Max: How would you group the various contacts from a same company to track that company's overall signal accumulation? Readiness for sales efforts can be invested in, slash readiness for sales efforts to be invested into. Um, Considering in B2B, you're selling to teams. Yeah, so I think I hopefully covered some of that with looking at organizations and like the calculated fields. There's other things you can do actually, which I didn't show, which is scoring. And so this is maybe more advanced too, is like you can create an organization level score. And then any signal that happens within someone who's matched that organization, you can like assign points and weighting to. And so if I go into here and edit this, you'll see, you know, both the organization criteria, like is it our ICP fit or not? Do they have like how many employees do they have? What's their tech stack like? What's their funding like? You can score on all these dimensions, but then you can also aggregate users who users within that account who are accumulating scores based on signals. So you can say, you know, add rule for you know, a job change is in the last 3 months or whatever, and then say the same thing within the last 6 months, and then like adjust that score accordingly. And so this is not the greatest example, I realize, but this is a way to aggregate scores at the organization level. And then once you do that, you're then able to sort by your organization score here and say like, oh, I'm going to filter by only, I want my team to only see accounts that have an organization score. Where is it score? Too many fields here. Yeah, organization score of at least good or excellent. So that helps you with prioritization and also grouping together all of that signal within different contexts. Cool. I got a question from Michaela on what social on Reddit within Slack communities that we are part of. Sorry, I'm trying to read this question. Are those signals trackable? So yes, I mean, pretty much if there's anything on the internet, it's trackable. It's just a matter of how easy it is. So it looks like the question is around Reddit or Slack communities. And so we try to make this as easy as possible with Common Room. And so we have this like library here. And so if you wanted to connect to Slack, you can easily, and RevGenius actually does this. I don't know, Gino can give like a thumbs up or say like, yes, we do this, but essentially the RevGenius community, they connect to their Slack and they can manage all of their user and activity data on by pulling in signal from Slack into Common Room. I will say though with Slack is you can't just like do this for your competitors, you know, Slack communities. They have to be, you have to be an admin and have to have permissions in order to be able to pull in that activity into Common Room. But for Reddit, for example, it's an open platform, and so you don't need to have any kind of. You can just point to a subreddit, listen for keywords, and pull that data into Common Room. So each of the different like channels depend on the level of permissions needed and like what's open or not. But I would say like for Reddit is also like another thing where it's a very anonymous by nature channel, and so it's really hard to match, you know, some random handle to like the actual person behind the signal. So like we find that our match rates, our enrichment rates with something like Reddit is a lot harder. It's more like you have to use Reddit for like social listening because you can't find within Reddit like this user handle is this person who I really care about from my target account. Like it's really hard to make that match rate just because of the nature of Reddit. So hopefully that question is answered. Let's see. Wow, lots of questions here. Okay, answered. Do you have to be a Slack admin? That one's answered. Into this category. Hold on. There's one last question I think here from Michaela. I guess my question here is related to competitive and ecosystem listening. This one is super interesting, I think, for companies that don't have a lot of awareness. Yes. So yes, you can do competitive and ecosystem listening on Reddit and Slack. And actually, that's what one play that a lot of our customers use on LinkedIn is they'll find posts from a competitor handle or a influencer in the space that's talking about a relevant topic. And then I can just pull this up on my LinkedIn and use Jared as an example again. So let's pretend that Jared is, oops, not Jared Waxman. Sorry, Jared Waxman, for blowing up your spot. Let's pretend that Jared Robin, who I'm okay with blowing up his spot, is a competitor of ours, or we're in a different community. And so um, uh, I can click on one of Jared's posts and then pull in the signal, like the reactions and the comments from this post that Jared has using our LinkedIn Chrome extension. So I can click add post here, and then if I'm logged in to common room, I can say pull in all the signal from this competitive post. Now, one other nuance to LinkedIn is that you can't just like search for keywords on LinkedIn and scrape it and pull in people who have reacted to those posts. It's just a limitation of LinkedIn. So that's kind of like the same thing with like a Slack admin. You have to identify signal within the bounds of what the platforms will allow you to do. And we try and do so as unnefariously or as by the rules as possible. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so I think I answered everything. Looks like answered everything. Gina had marked everything as answered. Thank you so much. Went longer than I thought I was gonna go. Cool. I think we're good. Thanks so much everyone for joining, and we will share the recording after. Really appreciate it.